Tom had been stationed on the Interstellar Diplomatic Station for 3 weeks, and so far, life hadn't been all that exciting. Sure, there were advanced technologies, alien species from distant galaxies, and the occasional spacewalk. But all of that didn't do much to shake off the deep sense of loneliness that tugged at him, like a heavy weight in his chest. The long stretches of quiet, the hum of machinery, and the sterile white walls of the station made him miss Earth more than he cared to admit. He hadn't had a chance to meet many people, at least not anyone who wasn't part of the diplomatic staff. And though he was used to dealing with humans in tricky negotiations and high-stakes situations, aliens, true, genuine aliens, were a whole other level of intimidating, especially when you didn't speak their languages or understand their customs. But that all changed the day he met Arana. It started like any other boring day. Tom was walking down the corridor towards the mess hall, hopping to find something that didn't taste like cardboard when he saw her. She was tall, even by alien standards, with skin that shimmered like it was made of liquid violet, an almost otherworldly glow that was both calming and mysterious. Her eyes were bright, glowing faintly with a soft light, as though they were windows to another galaxy. She was wearing a sleek, form-fitting outfit that looked like it belonged in a futuristic space opera. To say she was striking would be an understatement. She looked like someone who could stop an entire planet with a single glance. Tom couldn't help himself. He had always been the type to strike up a conversation, and even though he had zero experience with alien life forms, he wasn't about to let a little thing like intimidation stop him. He put on his most charming smile and walked up to her, leaning casually against the wall. "Hey there," he said, his voice smooth but light-hearted. "I want you." Arana stopped, blinking in surprise as she turned her gaze towards him. Her eyes flashed with something he couldn't quite place. Amusement, maybe? Curiosity. But before he could process it, she stepped closer, her movements fluid, almost graceful. "You want me?" she asked, her voice smooth like silk, with an accent he couldn't quite identify. Tom's grin widened. "Well, yeah, I do want you, but not like that," he added quickly, throwing his hands up as if to clarify. "I meant I need your help with this whole intergalactic food thing. I'm terrible with alien food. You'd be saving my life." Arana's lips curved into a small, knowing smile. "Ah, I see. You want me to help you survive a meal." She crossed her arms and tilted her head, her eyes gleaming with that same mysterious sparkle. "That's a very human request." Tom laughed, relieved that she didn't seem offended. "Well, you know, humans, we're not the best with alien cuisine, especially when it looks like something that could eat us rather than the other way around." Arana chuckled softly, the sound like a gentle wind rustling through leaves. "I'm sure you'll survive," she said, then added with a teasing glint in her eye, "at least for now." Something about her smile made Tom feel like the world had just shifted. His heart fluttered in a way he hadn't expected, and for a moment he forgot all about the food he'd been complaining about. He was looking at her now, really looking, and he couldn't quite explain the way she made him feel. "I'm Tom," he said, still trying to shake off the strange feeling she gave him. "I guess I'm just a little out of my depth here." "I'm Arana," she replied smoothly, "and you are not the first human to be out of their depth in the universe." Tom nodded, giving her a playful grin. "Yeah, we humans tend to jump into things without thinking, but hey, that's part of our charm, right?" Arana's smile deepened, and for the first time since they'd met, she seemed to let her guard down just a little. "Perhaps, but I suspect you do more than just jump into things." Her gaze lingered on him, her eyes scanning his face with a subtle intensity. Tom, caught off guard by the way she was looking at him, felt his cheeks flush. He wasn't used to being studied so closely. "Well," he said, trying to recover from the sudden surge of nerves, "I do have a reputation for being, charming, or so I've been told." She raised an eyebrow, her lips quirking up in a smile. "Is that so?" "Absolutely," he replied with exaggerated confidence, though he wasn't entirely sure where the words were coming from. He just felt good talking to her. She had this way of making everything feel less serious, like she didn't judge him for his silly jokes or awkwardness. "Well," Arana said, her voice suddenly quieter, more thoughtful, "I must admit I find your human humor intriguing. Most species don't approach things so directly." Tom grinned again. "I like to keep things simple. Too much thinking can complicate life, don't you think?" Arana's expression softened just a little as though she were considering his words. "Perhaps," she murmured, almost to herself. Then she looked back at him, her voice firm and light again. "I'll help you with your food dilemma, Tom, but be warned, aliens and their dishes can be unpredictable." Tom's eyes lit up with excitement. "I'm not afraid of a little unpredictability. I mean, we're in space, right? What's life without a little adventure?" Arana smiled at him, the corners of her lips curling up slightly. There was something about the way she smiled, like she knew exactly what he was thinking. Maybe it was the challenge in her eyes or the way she made everything feel like a game. "Very well then. You're in for quite a ride, human." As she turned to walk down the corridor, Tom couldn't help but watch her, feeling like he had just encountered someone, unlike anyone he had ever met before. There was something magnetic about her, something that pulled him in with a force he couldn't quite explain. He wasn't sure if he had just found a friend or if something deeper was starting to form between them. But one thing was for certain, he didn't want to find out just yet. Arana had already made it clear that she was a force to be reckoned with, and Tom was more than ready to find out where this unexpected journey with her would lead. The days that followed Tom's chance encounter with Arana were a blur of anticipation and excitement. They didn't spend every waking moment together, far from it. But when they did, it felt like the whole universe around them fell away. There was something magnetic about the way she carried herself, the way she seemed to understand the quiet things he didn't even know he felt. And now, here he was, standing in the station's kitchen, staring at an alien recipe scroll that looked like it was written in a language of squiggles and strange symbols. To be fair, it was written in a language of squiggles, but Tom wasn't exactly feeling confident. Arana had promised to help him with his food dilemma, and after a few days of teasing, the moment had finally arrived. He was supposed to make something that resembled a meal from a planet he couldn't even pronounce, using ingredients he had no idea how to handle. In short, he was doomed. Tom rubbed his forehead, sighing dramatically. Why do alien foods always have names that sound like they could be something dangerous? He muttered to himself. Because they are dangerous, came a voice behind him, smooth and teasing. Tom turned to see Arana standing in the doorway, arms crossed and a smirk on her lips. She was wearing a simple, elegant tunic that made her look like she belonged to the stars themselves. The light in her eyes seemed to glow brighter as she took in his disaster of a kitchen setup. "I thought you said you were good with food," she teased, raising an eyebrow as she glanced at the ingredients scattered across the counter. "This looks like a bomb went off." Tom threw his hands up in mock surrender. "Hey, I've only been in space for a few weeks. I'm still figuring out how to keep my lunch from floating away. Cooking with alien ingredients was never on my to-do list." Arana chuckled softly and stepped toward the counter. She reached for the recipe scroll with an easy grace, rolling it up and placing it aside. "This is nothing to worry about," she said confidently. "I'll guide you through it." Tom's heart skipped a beat. There was something reassuring about her calm presence, about the way she took control without ever seeming bossy. It was like she knew exactly what she was doing, and her confidence somehow made him feel like he could handle anything. "All right," he said, finally feeling like he might survive this alien dinner challenge after all. "You're the expert. What's first?" Arana smiled and picked up a small, shiny object from the counter. It looked like a tiny fruit, but when she squeezed it gently, a golden liquid oozed out. Tom's eyebrows shot up. Is that supposed to be food or some sort of space glue?" "This," Arana said, holding it up like a treasure, "is a Zilra fruit. You squeeze it and the juice is like liquid energy. A little goes a long way. Tom chuckled nervously, glancing at the tiny vial of glowing liquid. And you eat this stuff? Arana gave him a knowing look. I wouldn't recommend drinking it straight from the fruit, but in cooking it's perfectly safe. Just don't overdo it. With a playful grin, she handed him the fruit, and Tom gingerly squeezed it over the cooking pot. The liquid shimmered as it splashed, making a soft hissing sound as it hit the warm metal. See, Arana said, not so bad. Tom wiped his hands on a towel, still a bit uncertain. I'll believe it when I'm still alive after eating it. Arana let out a soft laugh that sent a pleasant shiver down his spine. I'll make sure you survive, she said, her tone light, but there was something deeper in her eyes. Now, onto the next ingredient. She turned to a box that was sitting at the edge of the counter and pulled out what appeared to be a small, glowing, multicolored bean. She tossed it lightly into the air before catching it with ease. This is a Phethra bean from the planet Zorath, Arana explained. It's the key to the dish. It has to be cooked at the perfect temperature or it can be explosive. Tom's eyes widened. Explosive like boom, explosive. Arana smiled mischievously. Exactly, but don't worry, she added with a wink. I'll be here to make sure you don't blow yourself up. Tom laughed nervously, eyeing the bean in her hand. He could almost feel the potential danger radiating from it. Great, just what I need. A little explosion with my dinner. Arana's laughter was like a soft melody that seemed to ease his nerves. She was so calm, so in control. It made Tom feel like maybe he wasn't as lost as he thought. Maybe he was right to trust her. Together, they worked through the meal, with Arana guiding him through every step. At times, she would hover close, showing him how to slice things in a way that felt almost intimate. Her breath would warm the back of his neck as she leaned over him, and he couldn't help but notice how her presence made the whole kitchen feel brighter, more alive. And there were moments, fleeting but real, where Tom found himself lost in her eyes, those strange, glowing eyes that seemed to hold entire galaxies within them. He found himself wondering what it would be like to just stay in this moment forever. Arana caught him staring once, her lips curling into that teasing smile that always made his heart race. You're distracted, Tom, she said softly. Concentrate. Tom shook his head, a little embarrassed. Right, no explosions, got it. When the dish was finally ready, it didn't look like much, just a simple stew with a few odd-looking vegetables and the strange fruits. But when Tom took a bite, he was stunned. The flavor was unlike anything he had ever tasted. It was spicy and sweet, rich with flavors he couldn't describe, each bite warming him in a way he didn't expect. Well, Arana asked, her voice filled with the anticipation of someone who was genuinely curious about the results. Tom took another bite, savoring the unexpected combination of tastes. It's amazing, he said, his voice full of genuine surprise. I never thought I'd say this, but I think you just made me a convert to alien food. Arana smiled, her eyes lighting up. I knew you would like it. Tom chuckled, shaking his head. You know, for someone who seems so serious, you've got a knack for making things fun. Arana's smile softened, and for the first time, Tom saw a hint of vulnerability in her gaze. Not everything is serious, she said quietly. Sometimes you just need to let go and enjoy the moment. Tom's heart skipped a beat. There was something in her tone, something that made him feel like they had just shared something, more than a meal. You're right, he agreed, his voice quieter now. This is the best moment I've had in a long time. And as they continued eating, the distant hum of the station seemed to fade away. In that small, quiet kitchen, it felt like they were the only two people in the universe. The connection between them, something unspoken yet undeniable, hung in the air like a promise, one that neither of them was quite ready to acknowledge but both knew was there, waiting for the right moment to bloom. The days that followed their cooking adventure seemed to blur together in a haze of shared smiles, quiet moments, and unspoken glances. Tom couldn't help but think about Arana constantly, her presence lingering in his mind long after their time together ended. Every interaction felt like a step closer, a thread weaving between them that he wasn't sure he wanted to pull away from. But as much as he was enjoying her company, he knew there was something about her, something distant, as if she carried an invisible wall that he couldn't quite break through. Still, they kept meeting, in the corridors during meals and on those late-night walks along the observation deck where the stars seemed to stretch on forever. Arana, ever so graceful and composed, kept him on his toes, teasing him with her wit and surprising him with her depth. Yet, every time he thought they were getting closer, there was always a distance that he couldn't quite cross. It was during one of these moments, when they were walking together in the kitchen again, that Tom found himself in deeper trouble than ever before. "All right, chef," Arana said, glancing over her shoulder as she caught him staring at the strange alien ingredients once more. "What's next on your culinary adventure?" Tom, who had already ruined dinner twice before, tried to keep his usual confidence. "Oh, I've got this. I'm practically a pro by now." Arana raised an eyebrow. "A pro, huh? Well, I guess we'll see." They were making a new dish today, something that Tom had been sure would be foolproof. A simple alien stew. How could anyone mess up stew, right? You just throw everything in the pot, let it simmer, and enjoy. At least, that was how it was supposed to go. Tom carefully took out a long, strange-looking root that Arana had warned him about. "This is a flana root," she explained, pointing to the delicate, swirly patterns on its skin. "Very powerful. You only need a little bit." Tom nodded, still feeling confident. He had gotten this far, hadn't he? Arana had even complimented him earlier for not completely destroying the kitchen. But when he started chopping the root, he didn't realize just how much too much could be. A slip of the knife here, a little extra force there, and suddenly the entire kitchen smelled like a cross between burnt rubber and something rancid. He looked down at the root pieces, way too much, and then back up at Arana, who had turned around with wide eyes. "Tom," she said, her voice a little more urgent, this is too much. You can't just throw it all in." Tom's face went pale. "Wait, what?" "You've used nearly half the root. It's too strong. We won't just have a stew, we'll have an explosion." Arana's eyes locked with his, filled with disbelief. "You're supposed to." Before she could finish, the entire room started shaking, and a loud hiss filled the air, followed by a crackling sound. Tom's heart jumped into his throat as he backed away from the counter, watching the bubbling pot on the stove. Wait, what?" Tom shouted, his voice rising in panic. "Oh God, what did I do?" Arana darted toward the stove, and for a moment it looked like she was about to try and grab the pot. But then, the heat coming off it made her stop. No, get back, you can't touch it yet." Tom was frozen for a second, completely caught off guard. He had no idea what to do. He had only wanted to impress her. Wasn't that why he'd tried so hard to get everything just right? But now he had made a mess. A big mess. Arana's voice softened, trying to calm him down. "It's okay, Tom. You're not in any danger, not yet." She reached out, pushing him back gently as she moved to the stove, her face serious but not angry. "I just need you to step aside." Tom took a breath and stepped back, watching her work with a level of grace that left him in awe. Arana's fingers flew over the controls, and with a series of quick movements, she managed to adjust the temperature and stabilize the mixture in the pot. It hissed less, and the bubbling slowed. The entire room seemed to exhale, the tension lifting. Tom blinked, stunned. "You saved us." She gave him a knowing look. "I told you it would be explosive." "Well, I wasn't expecting that much of an explosion," he said, half laughing, half panicked. He ran a hand through his hair, feeling embarrassed. "I guess I've got a lot to learn." Arana didn't say anything right away. Instead, she just walked over and placed a hand on his shoulder, her fingers cool and reassuring. "You're lucky I was here," she said softly. "Not many would have been able to handle that, but you," she paused, meeting his eyes. "You didn't give up, you didn't run." Tom couldn't help but smile, the way she was looking at him making his heart race a little faster. "Well, I had to stick around to see if I'd survive my own cooking," he joked, trying to keep things light. Arana laughed, and this time it was different. There was no teasing edge, no playful mischief, just pure amusement in the way her smile reached her eyes. She looked at him, really looked at him, and for a moment the kitchen felt warmer, lighter, as if they were both standing in a space that belonged to just the two of them. "I think," she said, her tone softer now, "you might just be the most stubborn human I've ever met." "Stubborn, huh?" Tom raised an eyebrow. "Well, I prefer determined, but I guess stubborn works too." Her laugh was like music, and Tom felt something stir deep inside him. He wasn't sure if it was the fear of nearly blowing up the station, or the relief that they were both safe. But whatever it was, it made him want to be close to her in a way he couldn't explain. "So what now?" he asked, his voice quieter than before. "Can we fix it?" Arana hesitated for just a moment, and then, with a small smile, she gestured for him to join her. "Now we fix it together." They worked side by side, both of them using their hands to carefully adjust the pot, her expertise guiding his clumsy attempts. Slowly, the dish began to come back under control, though it still smelled strange. Nothing like the first time they'd tried to cook together, but not entirely inedible either. When they finally finished, the stew looked more like a weird alien concoction than the grand dinner Tom had imagined. But as they sat down to eat, Tom realized that it didn't matter what the dish looked like. What mattered was that they had made it together, through the chaos, the mistakes, and the laughter. "Well," he said, taking a careful bite and looking up at Arana, "this is definitely something." Arana raised an eyebrow, taking a bite herself. "It's definitely not the worst thing I've ever tasted." Tom smiled, so, not an explosion of flavor. She chuckled, and Tom felt his chest tighten with something he couldn't quite name. "Maybe next time you'll follow the instructions." Tom grinned, leaning back in his chair. "I'm not making any promises, but I think I'll definitely need your help next time." Arana met his gaze, her eyes softening just a little. "Next time, then." The next few days were a whirlwind of routine, but with a subtle shift in the air. The comfortable silence between Tom and Arana was gone, replaced by something new. A quiet tension lingered between them, something unspoken yet undeniable. Tom couldn't help but notice the way Arana's presence seemed to fill up the room when she walked into it. The way her laughter felt like a light breeze on a hot day, refreshing and fleeting. And every time she glanced at him, her eyes would linger for just a second too long, as though she was trying to decide something, or perhaps asking something of him. He wasn't blind. He knew the connection between them was real. The playful teasing, the quiet moments shared over alien dinners, the way they spoke without words, he could feel it. But every time he thought about crossing that invisible line, he hesitated. Arana was from a different world, a different life, a different universe entirely. And yet she kept showing up. She kept being near him, her smile bright, her voice soft with something he couldn't quite decipher. It was late one evening when Tom found himself wandering through the station's long corridors, the soft hum of distant machines filling the silence. He'd been to the observation deck a few times since they first met, but tonight it felt different. It felt like he needed to go there, like something was pulling him toward it. As he walked, his mind kept circling back to Arana. What did she mean when she said she might not walk away next time? Was there more to it than just food? As if the thought summoned her, Arana appeared at the corner of the hall, looking as effortless and elegant as ever. Her long violet hair was pulled back into a sleek braid, and her eyes shimmered faintly in the dim light. She glanced up when she saw him, her lips curving into a smile that made his heart skip a beat. "Tom," she said, her voice as warm as it always was, "you're out late tonight." Tom smiled back, though it felt a little nervous, a little too unsure for comfort. I could say the same about you. What are you doing here? Erina's eyes sparkled with mischief. Just taking in the stars, they have a way of calming me. Tom nodded, his own gaze drifting toward the window behind her. The stars stretched out before them, endless and beautiful like a sea of light. He had never been much of a stargazer back on Earth, but here in this vast, cold expanse, the sight felt different. It was humbling. I guess they have that effect on me too, Tom said quietly. Sometimes it feels like, I don't know, like you're just a tiny speck in the grand scheme of things, but then you realize you are a part of it all. Erina didn't respond right away. She seemed to be studying him, her gaze thoughtful. I think you might be the first human to say that, she said softly. Most of your kind are restless, always seeking more, never satisfied. Tom chuckled, his fingers running through his hair as he shifted uncomfortably. Yeah, I guess we are a little restless. But you know, I think maybe that's a good thing. I mean, if we were all satisfied, we wouldn't be exploring the universe, would we? Erina tilted her head slightly, her eyes narrowing. I'm not so sure. Some things are meant to stay undisturbed. Tom looked at her then, really looked at her, and he could see the depth in her expression. There was more to her than just the alien exterior. There was history, experience, and maybe a little hurt, and he suddenly wondered if her words were more personal than she let on. Before he could ask, Erina turned back to the stars, her voice quieter. We all have our places in the universe, Tom, and sometimes those places are far from the ones we want. There was something in her words that made Tom's chest tighten, something heavy but uncertain. He took a step closer to her, unsure of what he was even going to say. What if? What if our places are exactly where we need to be? He said, his voice barely a whisper. What if this, right now, is where we're supposed to be? Erina's head snapped around to face him, her eyes wide. The intensity in her gaze made his breath catch in his throat. Tom, she stopped herself, biting her lip for a moment. You don't understand, she said quietly, her tone almost resigned. Tom reached out instinctively, his hand gently brushing against her arm. Maybe I don't, but I want to understand. Erina's eyes searched his face, her lips pressed together as if weighing something heavy in her mind. She opened her mouth to say something but hesitated. There was a long, painful pause between them. I'm not supposed to get close to you, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. You don't know what it's like for us, for me. You wouldn't understand. Tom felt a pang in his chest, but he didn't pull away. He was close enough now to feel the warmth of her presence, the quiet strength she carried with her. I think I might understand more than you think, he said, his voice earnest. I've never been great with understanding things, but I get you. I do. She shook her head, a soft smile tugging at her lips. I'm not so sure about that, human. Tom didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped closer, close enough that he could see the fine details in her face, the way her violet skin shimmered in the soft light, the way her eyes seemed to hold all the mysteries of the universe. Maybe I'm not supposed to understand everything, he said, his voice low, but I'm not going to stop trying, not with you. Erina's expression softened, and for the first time she reached out, placing a hand gently on his arm. You really are stubborn, aren't you? She asked, her voice holding a mixture of amusement and something deeper, something she hadn't said aloud before. Tom smiled, his heart racing. I guess you could say I'm determined, or maybe I just don't want to give up on this, on us. Her eyes flickered with something he couldn't place, something like surprise, but also something like hope. I don't know what this is, Tom, she said quietly, but maybe we'll figure it out together. And in that moment, under the vastness of the stars, Tom felt a spark of something more. Something that wasn't just about cooking dinners or sharing quiet conversations, but something that could be deep, something that could change everything. For the first time, he truly believed that no matter how different their worlds were, maybe they really were supposed to be here, right now, in this moment, together. Arana turned back to the stars, her fingers still brushing his arm, but Tom knew that this was the beginning of something new, something worth fighting for. And this time, he wasn't going to hesitate. The days that followed felt different. The air between Tom and Arana had shifted. It was no longer just friendly banter or casual conversations. It was something deeper, something that neither of them could ignore anymore. They kept meeting, often in the observation deck where the stars stretched out endlessly in front of them. Each time, there was a little more tension in the air, an unspoken pull that neither of them was ready to fully admit. Arana had always been distant, always holding something back, but Tom could see her walls slowly starting to crumble. And in a way, he was beginning to wonder if maybe, just maybe, the universe had brought them together for a reason. But there was still something holding them back, some invisible line neither of them dared to cross. One afternoon, while the station hummed quietly in the background, Tom received a message. It was from the Diplomatic Council, a mission urgent and classified. His mind raced. Missions weren't usually a part of his duties. Not like this. The message was clear. He was needed for a diplomatic mission to a distant colony, and he had less than a day to prepare. He found Arana in the hall, her face unreadable as she looked up from a datapad she'd been studying. "Tom," she said, her tone neutral, though Tom could sense something beneath it. "I assume you've heard." Tom nodded, his heart sinking just a little. "Yeah, I'm supposed to leave tomorrow, to the Xylos colony. Urgent stuff. I'm not really sure what it involves, but they need me there." Arana's gaze softened, but there was a flicker of something Tom couldn't quite place. "Xylos?" she asked. "That's a difficult place. Politics there are, complicated." Tom shrugged, trying to shake off the nerves creeping up his spine. "Yeah, that's what they told me, but hey, I'll manage. I've handled worse." He flashed her a grin, but it felt more forced than usual. Arana studied him for a long moment before taking a step closer. "Tom, you need to be careful," she said softly, her voice lower than usual. "The Zalosians are known for their unpredictable nature, and there are things happening there that aren't as simple as they seem." Tom met her gaze, and for a moment the world around them seemed to still. There was a weight in her words, something that went beyond the usual diplomatic warnings. It was like she was asking him to be cautious, to protect himself. "I'll be fine," he said, his voice softer now. "I've got this." But Arana didn't seem convinced. "Promise me something, Tom." "Anything," he replied without hesitation, his heart pounding in his chest. "Promise me you'll come back," she said, her eyes serious, searching his face as if she was afraid of the answer. "Promise me you won't get lost in the mess of it all." Tom felt a lump form in his throat. He'd always been good at handling danger, good at pushing past the fear and the chaos. But there was something about the way Arana was looking at him that made him question whether he was ready for this. I promise," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. "I'll come back, I promise." Arana didn't smile, but her eyes softened, and for the briefest moment it almost looked like relief. She stepped back, taking a deep breath. "You're a stubborn one, Tom. I hope your promise is as strong as your will," she said, her tone light again, though there was something in her voice that made it clear she was holding back more than she was saying. Tom smiled, though it was tinged with sadness. "I'll be back before you know it, and then we can get back to whatever this is." Arana nodded, a hint of a smile playing at the corner of her lips. "Be safe, Tom." With one last look, he turned and walked away, his heart heavier than before. He didn't know if he was more nervous about the mission ahead or the strange feeling in his chest every time he thought about Arana. The next morning, Tom boarded the shuttle for Xylos. The station's bright white walls and cool, sterile air seemed a million miles away as he left the familiar confines behind. His mind kept drifting back to Arana, though. What was it about her that made him feel this way? Why did it feel like he was walking away from something important? The Zalosian colony wasn't anything like the polished, high-tech space stations he was used to. The moment he arrived, the heat hit him like a wave. The colony was a sprawling settlement, full of dust and strange buildings that seemed to be built into the landscape itself. The locals didn't exactly roll out the welcome mat, and the political atmosphere felt thick, like tension hung in the air. Tom had expected to jump into diplomatic talks immediately, but when he was escorted to the meeting hall, something didn't feel right. The delegates he was supposed to meet weren't there. Instead, he was greeted by two Zalosian guards who eyed him warily, their alien faces unreadable. "Where are the diplomats?" Tom asked, trying to stay calm despite the sudden uncertainty. "They will arrive shortly," one of the guards said, but his voice was cold. The tension between them was palpable, and Tom could feel it in his gut. Something was wrong. Hours passed. Nothing. He waited and waited, but no one came. It was a standstill, a political game that left him feeling like he was a pawn in someone else's game. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, a voice came through his comm device, shaking him out of his thoughts. "Tom, it's Erina." His heart skipped. Hearing her voice felt like a lifeline in the middle of the mess. "Erina, what's going on? I'm stuck here. There's no one to meet me." "Stay calm," she said quickly. "I have some contacts. There are things going on behind the scenes that the Council hasn't told you about. Trust me, this is more than just a diplomatic visit. Watch your back. There are people who will try to use you." Tom's pulse quickened, but he took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "I don't know who to trust here." "You can trust me," she said firmly, "but I can't be there with you right now. Just be careful." Tom looked around the room. His mind raced with questions, with doubts. He had come here to make peace, to fix things, but now it felt like the situation was slipping out of his control. "Stay safe, Tom," Erina's voice came through again, softer this time. "I'll be here when you get back." "I'll be back soon," he said, though he wasn't sure if he believed it himself. He cut the connection, his heart heavy with the weight of what he now knew. He wasn't just here for diplomacy anymore. He was in the middle of something far more dangerous. But he also knew that no matter what, he had to make it back. For her. And with that, the real mission had begun. The mission on Xylos had taken a turn for the worse. What was supposed to be a simple diplomatic visit had turned into something far more complicated and far more dangerous. Tom found himself in the middle of a political power struggle he hadn't anticipated. The Zalosian leaders were in a volatile situation, divided by factions with different goals. And as much as he tried to stick to his mission, it was clear that he was just a pawn in someone else's game. But amidst the confusion, Tom kept one thing in mind: Erina's warning. "Stay calm, watch your back." Her voice echoed in his mind, a steady reminder of the person who had cared enough to reach out. Even though she wasn't here with him, Tom could feel her presence in every corner of his thoughts. The strange thing was, he was no longer just thinking about the mission or his survival. He was thinking about her. That thought unsettled him, though he didn't fully understand why. He had only known Erina for a short time, yet it felt like they had shared something deeper than most people did in a lifetime. He'd come to trust her, to rely on her strength, and in some quiet corner of his heart, he realized he had grown to care for her. And now, on Xylos, as the political tension increased and the stakes grew higher, it wasn't just his mission he was worried about. He was worried about Erina too. It was late in the evening when he finally found a quiet moment alone. The Zalosian colony had calmed down a bit, but he could still feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. The night was cool, and the vast desert landscape outside the station stretched out under a sky full of stars. It reminded him of those late-night talks with Erina back on the station, where they would just sit and watch the stars together. Those moments seemed so simple now, but at the time, they felt like everything. With a sigh, Tom activated his comm device and dialed Erina's frequency. It took a few seconds before her face appeared on the screen, her violet eyes bright and curious as she saw his face. "Tom," she greeted softly, her voice laced with relief. "I didn't expect to hear from you so soon." Tom's heart warmed at the sound of her voice, the familiarity of it giving him a strange sense of peace. "Yeah, well, I had a moment of quiet," he said with a smile, though the smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "I wanted to check in with you, make sure everything's all right." Arana raised an eyebrow, her gaze searching his face. "Everything's fine. What about you? How's the mission going? You're not in trouble, are you?" Tom hesitated, his fingers tapping nervously on the side of the table. "I don't know. I thought it would be easy. Talk to a few diplomats, make peace. But it's not that simple. There are people here who don't want peace. There's a lot more going on than I thought, and I'm starting to feel like I'm in way over my head." Arana's face softened, her lips pressing together as she listened to him. "I knew this wouldn't be easy," she said quietly. "I told you the Zolosians are complicated, but Tom," she leaned forward slightly, her eyes narrowing with concern, "you can't do this alone. You need to trust someone, you need to watch your back, and you need to be careful who you trust." "I know," Tom replied, his voice heavy with the weight of the situation. "But it's hard, Arana. I feel like I'm stuck between two sides, both pulling me in different directions. I don't know who to believe." Arana's eyes softened even more, and for the first time, Tom saw a vulnerability there, something that reminded him that despite her strength, Arana was just like him in some ways. She wasn't immune to the challenges life threw at her either. "You don't have to do this alone, Tom," she said softly, her voice full of empathy. "You have me. I've always had your back." Tom's heart skipped a beat. There was something in her words, something so real and sincere that it felt like it reached into his chest. He opened his mouth to say something, but the words didn't come. He hadn't realized how much he had come to rely on her, how much her presence in his life had become a quiet source of strength. Arana's voice broke through his thoughts, gentle but insistent. "Tom, what is it?" "I don't want to be alone here," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't want to be away from you." The words hung between them as if time had frozen for a moment. Arana's expression shifted, and for a moment Tom thought she might laugh it off, maybe make a joke to lighten the mood. But instead she just looked at him, her gaze soft and steady. "You're not alone, Tom," she said quietly, her voice barely a whisper. "You've never been alone." Her words hit him harder than he expected, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Tom felt a wave of relief wash over him. Maybe he wasn't alone after all. Maybe everything he had been feeling wasn't just some random impulse. Maybe, just maybe, Arana felt the same way. I care about you, Arana," Tom blurted out before he could stop himself. "More than I've cared about anyone in a long time." Arana's eyes widened, and for a split second Tom feared he had said the wrong thing. But then she spoke, her voice barely audible. "I care about you too, Tom. I've never met anyone like you." Her words, soft and genuine, made his heart race. But it wasn't just the words that made everything feel different. It was the way she said them, the way she looked at him. It was real. And for the first time since he'd arrived on Xylos, he didn't feel so alone. There was a long pause, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the soft hum of the station in the background. Then, slowly, Arana reached for her comms controls, the soft click as she disconnected it making Tom's heart skip again. "I'll be waiting for you, Tom," she said softly, the words both a promise and a plea. "Come back to me." Tom swallowed hard, his chest tight with emotion. "I will," he whispered, his voice filled with determination. "I'll be back, I promise." As the screen went dark, Tom sat there for a long time, his mind racing with everything that had just been said. But deep down, amidst the uncertainty of the mission, he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't just fighting for peace on Xylos anymore. He was fighting for something much more important, for them. And that, he realized, was the most important battle of all. The mission on Xylos had turned into a whirlwind of confusion and danger. Tom had spent the past few days navigating through complicated political alliances and tenuous talks, trying to keep things from falling apart. The tension in the air had been palpable, and it seemed like every decision he made only added to the pressure. Yet, amidst the chaos, there was one thing that kept him grounded: Arana. Even though she was miles away, her voice in his comm device had become his lifeline. Her guidance, her words of encouragement, and the warmth in her tone had kept him going when everything seemed to be spinning out of control. But now, as he stood at the edge of the Zalosian settlement, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Tom felt like everything was coming to a head. He had just made a critical decision, one that could change the course of the entire mission. He had chosen a side, a risky move that could either lead to peace or plunge the colony into war. His heart raced, but it wasn't just the weight of the mission that made him feel this way. It was the thought of Arana. The promise he had made to return to her, safely in one piece, was always in the back of his mind. He had no idea what was going to happen next, but the thought of her gave him strength. He had to finish this, not just for the people of Xylos, but for himself, for them. He pulled out his comm device and dialed Arana's frequency, hoping that this time, the connection would be strong enough for her to hear him clearly. It only took a moment before her familiar face appeared on the screen. Her violet eyes lit up when she saw him, but there was an undeniable tension in the way she looked at him. It was like she was bracing for something. "Tom," she said softly, her voice a mixture of relief and concern. "I was starting to think I wouldn't hear from you." Tom smiled, trying to mask the exhaustion that weighed on him. "You weren't the only one thinking that," he said, his voice a little rough. "But I've got something important to tell you." Arana's eyes sharpened and she leaned in slightly. "What is it? You're okay, aren't you?" "I'm okay," Tom reassured her quickly, though the truth was he wasn't sure how long that would last. "I made a decision. I chose a side. It's risky, Arana. I don't know if it's going to work, but I'm going to see it through." Arana's face softened, her eyes glimmering with something unreadable. "You're always jumping into things without thinking, aren't you?" she said, her voice light but with an undercurrent of warmth. "But I'm proud of you. I know you'll make the right choice." Tom's heart did a strange, fluttering thing in his chest. He hadn't expected her to say that. He had hoped, of course, but hearing her words made everything feel different. Her support meant more than he could put into words. "Thanks, Arana," he said quietly, looking down at his hands for a moment. "You don't know how much that means to me." Arana's smile was soft but full of meaning. She didn't need to say anything more. They both knew what was unspoken. The connection they had built wasn't about grand gestures or declarations. It was in the quiet moments, in the shared understanding, in the way they both cared about each other without needing to make it complicated. Tom ran a hand through his hair, looking at her again. "I'm going to finish this. I'll be back to you, I promise." "I'll be waiting," Arana said, her voice soft and steady. "And Tom, be careful, you're not alone in this." He nodded, his throat tight. He didn't want to say goodbye, not yet, but the mission was waiting and time was running out. "I'll talk to you soon," he said, his voice a little rougher than he intended. "And, Arana." She raised an eyebrow, curious. "Yes." "I care about you," Tom blurted out, surprised by his own honesty. "More than I've said, more than I've realized." Arana's expression softened, and for a moment she just stared at him, as if processing his words. Then, without a word, she gave him a small, knowing smile. "I care about you too, Tom. Don't forget that." And with that, she disconnected the call. The next few hours felt like a blur. Tom worked furiously with the Zalosian delegates, trying to broker a deal that could prevent war. The pressure was immense, but he couldn't shake the feeling that Arana's words were there with him, guiding him. He was doing this not just for the mission, not just for the people of Xylos, but for her too. The tension in the air grew thicker as the night wore on. The diplomats were finally in agreement, but there were still murmurs of doubt. Tom had done his part, but the situation was far from over. As he stood at the conference table, listening to the Zalosian leaders debate the finer details of the agreement, he couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. Every decision he had made, every choice he had taken, had led him to this point. And then, in the middle of the heated discussion, one of the delegates suddenly turned to him, a small smile playing at the corners of his lips. "You've done it," the delegate said quietly, almost as if he were talking to himself. "You found a way to make us listen." Tom blinked, surprised by the comment. "What do you mean?" The delegate nodded toward the agreement, the document now signed by all parties. "You brought us together, not just with words but with something else, something none of us could ignore." Tom's heart skipped a beat. It was the first real sign that his mission had been a success. He had done it. He had made the right choice. But just as the weight of his success began to settle in, a commotion outside the room caught his attention. He turned, a frown crossing his face. The door opened, and a familiar voice rang out. "Tom!" He turned, and his breath caught in his chest. Standing in the doorway, looking just as radiant as ever, was Arana. She was here. Somehow, she had found a way to get to him. "I couldn't stay away," she said with a soft smile, her eyes locking onto his. "I had to see you." Tom didn't know what to say or how to respond. All he could do was step forward, his heart swelling with emotion. "Arana," he whispered, his voice full of disbelief and joy. She crossed the room in a few quick steps, and before he could even think, she was in his arms. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. He held her close, feeling the warmth of her body against his, and it was as if all the chaos, all the tension, had melted away. "I promised I'd come back," Tom said, his voice thick with emotion. "I wasn't sure if I could, but I did." Arana pulled back just enough to look up at him, her smile soft and tender. "And I promised I'd be waiting," she said quietly. "And I will, Tom, always." In that moment, everything felt right. The stars outside the window, the quiet hum of the station, the way their hearts beat in sync, it was all there, and it was enough. They had made it through the storm together. And as they stood there in each other's arms, Tom knew that no matter what the future held, they would face it together. The adventure was far from over, but for now they had each other, and that was all they needed.